Hello, this is Valk from Dem Hobbies, and it's good to be back. It's been a bit of a time off. I think, what has it been, 2.5 weeks, closer to 3? The time off that me and Hype had taken was, just for your guys' information, was just a little bit of spare time that we needed to, A, retool the channel, and B, also move. We're in the middle of moving when we really were getting into the swing of things, but now we are looking at being a lot more stable where we are and getting things kind of worked out and all the hearsay, near say kind of stuff going into a new place, right? So now that we're settled, we're getting back to the real deal, and that is casting for you guys. So that being said, let's get started with my first video back. That will be Card of the Week. And what can we expect from Card of the Week? Well, to say the least, I just want to really say that Card of the Week for you guys is on the footnote of a bit of information that's been up for us, right? So Card of the Week was in conjunction with format news that was coming out. I'm talking about the rotation. Yes, that very, very, very somber word, rotation. Or maybe it's very enlightening for you guys to hear the word rotation. For me, it was, well, I've really been waiting to hear about the rotation and where it lands, what stays, what goes. But in that news, what could be good is also could be bad. And this is really why I'm being more sentimental about my Card of the Week for this one. So my Card of the Week is going to N. N is one of the cards that is, this card is very difficult to talk about because it really is straightforward in what it does. So that means there's a lot to talk about the card, and then there's not a lot to talk about the card. So it's kind of back and forth. That being said, a lot of it is just more sentimental value than anything. So, to say the least, what does that really bring out? Well, for starters, N is pretty much just a character that's been introduced in the black and white set. It was a card that for very many of us, character, for very many of us, that was just supposed to be the person that was the bad guy or the counter main character. But for a lot of us, in his own personal traits, he didn't end up being that. We ended up finding out who that jerk was, but that being said, and ended up being more of a character that a lot of us could relate to. A bit of a loner, into maybe more so something that is outside of the norm, although Pokemon in its world is not outside of the norm. But for us, we did understand and did relate to the character for a lot of us. So where does that really leave N as a whole? For me, he was an A+ character. He really was. So this kind of comes on the heels of knowing that N, the card coming up in this rotation, is really going to be out the window, which is kind of sad. But let's continue on with what that means for the TCG, right? So for those of you who aren't really aware of what N is, let's get into the meat and bones of this card. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck, then each player draws the same number of prize cards remaining from their side of the field, of course. What does that mean? Well, I'll be 100% honest with you, and I'm trying not to offend anybody, but let's be real here. N boils down to two kind of factors. If you don't understand what N does, either A, you are a very, very inexperienced player, or not really a player at all, so you've never had it played against you in that moment, or B, you haven't been winning. And let's just say if either one of those are the truth, then I don't know what to do for you. I really don't. That being said, let's build a scenario here. Let's say your opponent is down to, a couple cards late in the game. There's only 1 or 2 prizes left for your opponent, and they potentially have the winner in your hand. You go to draw, and what do you draw? You draw the mother of all cards, and you flip it down on the mat. Now, you and your opponent are both surprised. You're both blown away. Now you're looking at yourselves, what are we going to do here? And you just end him into a very, very, very terrible top deck option. So, this being said, where does that really leave your opponent? They're flipping out, they're raging, they're mad. They just probably lost the game. If you've ever been hit with an N at the last moment, you know exactly what that feels like. And you're not ready to deal with any of that stuff the right way. And if you're anybody that has been to any of these events, especially out into the bigger ones, you might have seen some very funny stuff. I've at least seen one, well, maybe two considerable moments where somebody was just a little bit unruly after a decent placed N. So, to say the least, for anybody who doesn't really understand what the potential of that card is, being ended down into a moment where you could have possibly won and then losing it all to just one single card is scary to say the least. But let's talk about that card for a moment. The card is a double-edged sword to say the least, and you have to be aware of its ups and downs very early into the game, which is why I normally play lower numbers of N. You could be in a top deck situation between you and your opponent, and the game has just started. The card that you have for a draw option is N. You don't want to give your opponent that edge to possibly have a fresh hand, especially if they are in the moment where they are just benching one card and turn, playing another card and turn, playing one card and turn. That's not the moment that you should be playing N because they're already stuck. So, that being said, the card in itself, where do you really find support for it, especially in the late game? As long as you're set up with certain support cards like Artillery or Oranguru, you're going to be in a position to where you just want to play an N and you can draw out of it. Now, if your opponent has the same setup, one of these two cards, potentially both, if all three of these cards are in conjunction, it looks really crazy and chaotic at the end of the game. But that being said, with the rotation coming, two of these cards are leaving. N being the bigger card, especially in a bad situation where you could potentially flush out a win game scenario for your opponent. But all hope is not lost. With the inclusion of other cards in this set that haven't really been getting so much look, we can look forward to the future of a decent successor for N to some degree, to say the least. Peaking Red card is a card that where you count the current amount of cards in your opponent's hand, shuffle them back into the deck, and they are allowed to draw the same amount of cards. Judge is a supporter card that will just shuffle both players' hands into their decks and draw 4. With the leftover support cards that are out there, that really being Zorok and Oranguru, Judge puts you in a position where you could potentially have something being 4 cards. That really determines based on how the deck is really going at that point in time in the match, but all hope is not lost. So that being said, with at least some kind of successor coming in N's place, there is some level of control that can still be managed, especially at the end of games or during a match in general. For this card of the week, I am, to say the least, a little sad to see N go. It's really just, like I said before, it's a lot of sentimental values seeing N as a card go at this point in time. I started picking up Pokemon especially heavily during the Black and White era, a little bit before it. So I've been with this card for the longevity of its playtime, and it's kind of a somber thing to see it go. So cheers to the rotation that's coming up, I believe sometime in August, if I read the articles correctly. It'll be sad to see it go. So over the next weeks, let's try to enjoy what's left of the current rotation, current format, and I will see you guys next time. Keep your ears and eyes out for any videos that we'll be posting in the next couple of days throughout the weeks. Again, we're more settled now, so we'll be doing a lot of recording for you guys and getting fun decks out there, and really more so talking and preparing for the meta change. So this is Valk, and I'm out. I will see you guys next time.